Hi Adam, thanks for joining me.
Damn.
Yeah, a long journey here. And I just how I met. So this is Adam Pugh, everyone. I came across him on Twitter, and I just thought the stuff you were saying really resonated with me. And obviously, when I found out you were white, I was like, wow, this is something that a lot of people his colour should be doing, speaking out and stuff. Because I feel that it's not just black people that should be speaking out. If white people speak out also, maybe things could accelerate. So I just thought, this would be an interesting person to have a conversation with. So thank you for...
No worries, good to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
Agreeing with this. So first off, could you just tell me who you are, tell me what your story is?
Yeah, so I'm Adam Pugh. I grew up in Deptford, in Lewisham in South London. My story, I mean, what do you want to know? My backstory is that, so I don't have any brothers or sisters, it's just me.
Okay.
I was brought up in a very conservative white family.
Mm-hmm.
And where I live in Deptford, I was really fortunate, really privileged. So I don't know how well you know Deptford or South London, but I grew up on the edge of the Peeps Estate, which is a really at that time quite a rough and deprived estate.
Okay.
But I had the privilege of growing up on the edge of the estate.
Okay.
In a nice house where I was able to almost experience that life of growing up on an estate, but then having the safety of being able to come back to my home and shut my doors at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, growing up, it was maybe more easy for me than most to be aware of my privilege and to see my privilege, because that contrast was very much in my face. I was able to, my friends and people I grew up with were people who, quite often we would be chilling on the estate, and their life experience was such that they would go home and maybe, there wasn't any money to put on the electric meter, or there was no food in the fridge, and I was able to kind of see that and witness that. One of my best friends growing up, we went to the same school, we dressed the same, listened to the same music, very much culturally similar, Nigerian guy, and
we're Nigerian as well.
hey, but yet he was stop and searched more times in 1 week by the police than I was in my entire life, and I could see that, it was very evident.
Yeah.
I couldn't avoid that.
Growing up, did that ever sort of affect your friendship, or sort of as you were growing up together, did you guys ever question that back then? Why is my mate getting searched more? Is he bad, or what's going on there?
I don't think it was something that we questioned in that, is he bad? It was just something that we were always aware of that contrast. We were always aware of the fact that the reason why he was being stopped by the police was because of the colour of his skin. Mm-hmm. That was very evident to us. So I think even just culturally for a lot of us that came from that place, we didn't like the police growing up because of our experiences and what we were kind of subjected to. So that was I guess that's a little bit of my upbringing, and kind of the environment that I'm coming from.
Mm-hmm.
When I was 15, so I was in year 11. I was in secondary school. I was arrested my first arrest was for assault on a police officer, funnily enough. My second arrest was for possession and discharge of a firearm, which was CS gas. I have to quantify that because when...
That counts as a firearm?
Counts as a firearm, so Section 3 firearm, yeah. So when you if you go for a job or something like that and they do a security clearance, it doesn't actually specify what it is, it just comes back and it says possession and discharge of a Section 3 firearm, and then what the outcome was. So the outcome was I had a caution. I had a juvenile caution, which I probably wouldn't have got if it wasn't for the colour of my skin. Again, it was just another kind of example of the privilege that I experienced. So that was kind of my teenage years, and I think naively at that time, I felt like if you want to make a difference, then you need to be the difference. So I decided that I would kind of pursue the idea of joining the Met. It took me 6 years to get in.
Why did it take you so long?
Probably because of my firearms caution. I would imagine. So they don't tell you why. They just decline.
Mm-hmm.
So I applied. I eventually got through to the interview stage, and when I got through to that stage, it was fine. I knew that I would be cool. So yeah, I joined the Met.
Why did you join?
As I said, because I think naively at that time I felt like if you want to make a difference, then be the difference.
Mm-hmm.
That I was going to be able to maybe go in and make some kind of change or impact from within, be a part of, making it different, being a better type of police officer, being the type of police officer that isn't going to behave the way that we experienced growing up on that estate. So I think that was really one of my motivations for joining.
Do you feel you made a difference in hindsight or looking back?
Do I feel like I made a difference? Yeah, in some regards. I think the reason why I stayed 4 years, I think the reason why I stayed for 4 years, I knew very quickly that it wasn't where I wanted to be and wasn't what I was going to do long term. I stayed because you're able to make a change and you're able to make an impact with your colleagues. You're able to have those conversations, confront why they think the way they think, or those conversations were cool. There were a number of colleagues that, one in particular that kind of came to my church and ended up becoming a Christian. That was cool. I definitely was able to make a change in that regard, but not necessarily the change that I wanted to make or the people that I wanted to make a change or impact it on a grander level. So I think that for me, that was part of leaving, because I think that I got to the point where I realised that, look, it is very difficult to make a change, particularly when it comes to, we'll come on to it, but when we're talking about issues of race. How do we make a change in that area when the Met still don't acknowledge that this problem exists? So the Met will categorically deny now in 2018 that it doesn't have an issue with institutional racism. So one, if you can't even acknowledge that the problem exists, it's very difficult for us to talk about solutions. Two, it is resistant to change, so it's not something that they don't want to change. They're not welcome to that idea of change. And equally, when you are within, you're at their whim, because ultimately, whether it's they pay your bills or you work for them, so they're able to discipline you. So you can't really speak freely. Now I can come here and I can say whatever I want to. I can talk very openly and freely about my experience, what my personal opinions and beliefs are.
Were your views frowned upon even then? Or were they just like, Adam, turn down on that? Okay, we get it. Okay, cool. What was like the demeanour like during that time?
Yeah, I guess it depends. So some people will respect you for having the courage of. So in any job, if you're gonna, particularly that kind of environment, if you're gonna stand by the courage of your convictions and you're gonna be principled, it's not easy, and that can be even aside from your personal opinions and beliefs. So, for example, when I joined, I always tell this story about a time when I was told to stop and search someone by a sergeant, and I said that I wasn't going to do it. Now, I then had to go and not only sit down with him, but with the inspector and give an account for why I'd said I wasn't going to do that. When you're somebody that is going to challenge authority or is going to say, no, I'm not going to do that.
Especially for the police.
Things can be very difficult because people will ostracise you, or people will not want to work with you, or you'll be seen as difficult. So you do have to kind of try and find a balance. But for me, that job in particular, and probably for a lot of jobs in the public sector, it forms very much people's identity. It's who they are. So people feel like, I'm Adam and I am a police officer. That's part of their identity, it's part of who they are. For me, that was never the case. My life is very much outside of this. This is just something that I do. This is a job that I have. So that never really defined me in that way. So I wasn't there to be popular. I wasn't there to be liked. I wasn't there to make friends. I was there to do what I was there to do. Not everybody liked that. Some people respected it, and respected the fact that I was. That's what I stood for. But I still maintain some good relationships with some of my previous colleagues. Most don't like me, but that's absolutely fine. It is what it is.
You said something on Stop and Search. I was going to ask you, I've always wanted to ask an ex-police officer, I think I know what the answer is going to be, but were there policies or protocols put in place to specifically target minorities when it comes to stop and search, and how was that implemented, even in subtle ways or sort of like indirect ways? How are they implemented? How are they said to you to implement that?
Yeah, I don't think that there's specific sort of targets. It's not something that you're told, go out and target, but it's definitely something that exists at the very least on a subconscious level.
Okay.
So one of the things that I found is that, working in Southwark, so Peckham, Walworth, Rotherhithe, Elephant and Castle, that whole kind of area, only like 6% of the police officers there live in that borough.
Okay.
Everyone lives in other boroughs, or outside of London. So the majority commute in. They live in Kent, Gravesend, Surrey, wherever, and that's for a variety of reasons. But what you find is that if you have men and women that live in highly populated white areas, have very little interaction with somebody from a different race, different culture, whatever it may be, and then they come in, so they commute into work, do a very antisocial job, very difficult job, and the only contact that they have with those people is often negative or often volatile. It's easy to see how over a period of time those dots can kind of be connected, and they don't have any sense of emotional attachment to the area that they're policing, or the people. So the people are othered. When I was out in the street, this is my community. When I would stop somebody, to me, that is a member of my community. That wasn't the other.
Were
So
you like familiar face as well, like obviously because being from that community? Oh, how's it going?
Yeah, definitely. So there were everyone on the estate knew who I was or knew what I did.
Make the stop and search easier if you had to do it. Or...
Well, I was fortunate because so the shifts that I chose, things like stop and search that wasn't my priority. That wasn't why I was there. So some people might really like response policing. So going out, dealing with 999 calls, blues and twos, flashing lights, great, wonderful. And that's great, but the novelty of that wears off very quickly, and for me, there was never any sense of enjoyment out of arresting someone and taking their liberty away. That's something that you have to do, but that for me, there was no sense of enjoyment in that. For me, I really enjoyed, the side of whether it be community policing, whether it be, summer youth engagement schemes, working with young people so that their first interaction with the police is not negative. Things that, or going into schools, working with the schools teams and talking with kids in schools, things that some people may feel like is not real policing because you're not doing the stop and searches, or you're not doing, maybe the level of arrests. So for me, that was kind of what I focused on. Did I find the stop and searches I didn't find particularly challenging? Because I think if you do it in the right way, when you need to, and you treat people with respect and talk to them like a human being, most of the time they understand.